How easily have you given your trust throughout your life? And how many times have you returned empty-handed or worse, with a wounded soul? It's curious how, from a young age, we're taught that trusting is something noble, almost automatic, as if it were enough to look into someone's eyes, hear a kind word, or receive a promise to open the doors of our soul. But over time, life teaches us something else, that not everyone who approaches us does so with good intentions, that not every smile is sincere, and that sometimes the hand that caresses today will be the one that strikes tomorrow. Most people don't act out of malice, but out of their own interests. That doesn't make them monsters, but it does make them complex, imperfect humans, often unaware of how much harm they can cause when they use another's trust as a tool to advance their own agenda. And there you are, expecting them to think like you, to feel like you, to return the care, the support, the loyalty, only to discover that the mirror you thought you saw was nothing more than a projection of your own values. This is one of the great emotional mistakes we make, believing that others share the same internal code as we do, that if we help, they'll help us, that if we're transparent, they'll be transparent too. But trust shouldn't be an automatic gift. It must be built over time, with consistency, with someone's ability to uphold what they say, not just when it's convenient for them, but especially when it's not. Trusting without observing, without listening beyond words, without paying attention to the small acts that reveal character, is like leaping into the void without a parachute. And it's not about living in fear. Fear closes doors that perhaps should never have been shut. It's about living with awareness, sharpening that inner eye that knows how to read gestures, delays, silences that speak louder than 1,000 declarations. It's not coldness, it's wisdom. It's not chronic distrust, it's emotional self-preservation. So, I invite you to not give your trust as a favor, but to build it as a process. Observe calmly before sharing. Feel before revealing, and ask yourself, has this person shown consistency with their words? Have they been there when it wasn't convenient? Have they sustained the bond when there was nothing to gain? Trust isn't given. It's built step by step on the foundation of actions, not intentions. There's something particularly painful about discovering that someone who seemed close, even affectionate, was only playing a role. It's not about overt betrayal or a direct blow, but something subtler, quieter, and for that very reason, more confusing. Hypocrisy is a poison disguised as affection. It doesn't arrive with shouts or obvious confrontations. It comes with public praise that later turns into private criticism, with attention that only exists as long as there's something to gain, with false interest that serves as a mask for manipulation and information gathering. Many false people don't have a clear intention to harm. They simply live in a logic where relationships are tools for validation, power, information, or benefits. That's why they often seem approachable, charming, even seeking you out, listening to you, praising you. But if you observe closely, you start to notice that this closeness has a purpose, that behind the friendliness, there's calculation, that their questions aren't genuine, but strategic, that their attention only appears when you have something to offer. And this is where many good people get confused, because it's hard to accept that the person who laughed with you, who seemed to celebrate your successes, was also sowing doubts about you when you weren't around, that the hand that hugged you also wrote messages questioning your decisions, that the one who claimed to admire you was also uncomfortable with your growth. But the signs are there, even if the affection we feel often blinds us to them. The most complex part is that when you confront someone like this, the response is usually denial, dramatization, or victimhood. That's why, instead of engaging in an emotional war, the most mature strategy is different. Reduce access, share less, expose less, limit the kind of energy you offer. It's not about cutting ties abruptly, but about placing invisible filters. Because over time, inconsistency reveals itself. There's no need to unmask anyone. You only need to observe in silence. Hypocrisy doesn't always need to be fought. Sometimes it's enough to starve it. Because when someone no longer finds in you the source they once used, they lose interest, and meanwhile, you regain your clarity. So, before opening your heart to someone who smiles at you, ask yourself, how genuine is this presence? What's the purpose of their closeness? What does their way of speaking about others reveal? Because often, the way someone talks about others is the clearest mirror of how they'll talk about you. There are moments when someone doesn't need to shout to hurt you. Sometimes what hurts isn't direct aggression, but that small provocation disguised as a joke, as irony, as an apparently harmless comment. It's a silent form of violence that many don't even recognize as such. But you feel it, because every time they throw a jab, a mocking laugh, a word loaded with double meaning, their goal isn't to argue with you. It's to destabilize you. And if they manage to make you lose control, they've won. These people feed off your reactions. They need you to explode so they can point at you as exaggerated, emotionally unstable, difficult. They provoke you until you respond, and then they use your response to justify themselves. It's a perverse, exhausting game, especially for those still learning to defend their emotional balance. But here's a powerful tool: tactical silence. Not the silence that harbors resentment or hides fear, but the silence born of awareness, the kind that knows not everything deserves a response. Some phrases are designed to manipulate you, not to engage in dialogue with you. True control isn't about silencing the other, but about not letting them pull you out of yourself. It's not about always staying silent. There are moments when firmness is necessary, but even that firmness can be expressed without losing composure. You can look someone in the eyes and calmly ask, "Is there something you really want to say to me, or are you just trying to provoke me?" It's not aggression, it's clarity. It's emotional maturity in action. It's also crucial to learn to choose your battles. Not everything is worth your energy. Not everyone deserves your attempt at explanation or correction. Sometimes the most powerful act is simply not engaging. Not because you lack arguments, but because you know some dialogues aren't built to move forward. They're designed to wear you down. True emotional authority isn't shown when you impose your point of view, but when you choose not to lose your peace to prove it. Calmness in the face of provocation isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of inner strength. And that strength isn't built in the moment of offense, but in the silent work of knowing yourself, knowing who you are, and not needing the other's approval or provocation to feel alive. Ask yourself, how much of what you respond to comes from your core, and how much comes from the need to defend yourself? What would happen if, just once, you chose to stay silent and observe? Perhaps there, in that moment, you discover a new kind of power. There's a strength that doesn't impose itself with shouts or harsh gestures, but manifests in the way you walk through life with open eyes and a straight back. A strength that doesn't come from hardcore pride, but from the combination of two deeply human qualities, the cunning of the one who observes and the authority of the one who sets boundaries. Imagine for a moment being both a fox and a lion at the same time. The fox, who knows how to wait, who doesn't rush, who doesn't reveal their intentions quickly, and the lion, who doesn't allow their emotional territory to be invaded, who commands respect with their mere presence. The fox's cunning isn't deceit, it's emotional intelligence. It's the ability to analyze without others noticing you're observing. It's not speaking too soon. It's noticing how someone acts when they think you're not paying attention. It's remembering details, changes in tone, small contradictions. The fox doesn't react hastily, doesn't give in to impulse, doesn't offer trust without clearly seeing who's in front of them. And then there's the lion. They don't need to explain their power. They embody it. The lion doesn't beg for respect. They live it. They know when to roar, but don't waste their voice. They set boundaries without aggression, but with firmness. Their energy isn't defensive. It's clear. They don't get dragged into the need to please because they know that those who respect themselves unsettle those accustomed to invading. When these two forces balance within you, something profound happens. You stop feeling vulnerable to others' manipulation. You no longer need to constantly prove your worth or protect yourself. You become unpredictable, and that unpredictability isn't chaos, it's self-control. It allows you to choose when to speak, when to act, and when to simply observe without exposing yourself. Because if you only have cunning, you might seem manipulable. If you only have strength, they might use you against yourself. But if you combine both, if you can move between the fox's patience and the lion's dignity, then you are free. Free to react from yourself, not from the other. Free to withdraw without fear. Free to decide without seeking permission. Reflect for a moment. When have you been only the fox, hiding what you knew? And when have you been only the lion, losing subtlety in your desire to be respected? What would change in your life if you could embody both qualities with maturity and without fear? Being a good person shouldn't be an invitation to abuse. And yet, how many times has kindness been mistaken for weakness? How many times has someone approached you, not for who you are, but for everything you're willing to give? And the hardest part isn't that they used you, it's that they did it while you thought they were grateful. Because noble people struggle to imagine someone approaching without reciprocity. They believe, with that faith that hasn't been entirely extinguished, that if they give with their heart, they'll receive something similar in return. But that's not always the case. Some people develop a quiet skill for detecting generous, available, willing to help individuals. They don't do it with explicit malice. They do it with an almost automatic instinct. They know how to ask without limits, how to praise just before requesting a favor, how to create a sense of closeness that's really just one-sided emotional dependence. And if you haven't learned to set boundaries, you find yourself giving more than you have, justifying what you shouldn't tolerate, staying when everything inside you begs you to leave. This is where kindness needs to transform into intelligent kindness. It's not about hardening yourself, but about rooting yourself, learning that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. That walking away from a relationship sustained only by your effort isn't selfishness, it's self-care. Protecting your energy isn't closing your heart, it's prioritizing your emotional health. Because someone who only stays when you can give isn't with you, they're with your availability. And when you stop being available, they disappear. Learning to set boundaries doesn't require shouting, justifying, or explaining yourself over and over. Sometimes it's enough to change your response, to not react the same way as always, to not treat every request as urgent. It's in these small changes that the relationship is redefined, and those who truly value you will understand. The others will likely drift away, and that's okay, because respect isn't negotiated, it's established. And those who can't live with your boundaries can't live with your essence either. Ask yourself this question, slowly, honestly. How many times have you said yes out of fear of disappointing? And what part of you has been left empty by not knowing how to say enough? Your kindness deserves to be protected, not to become cold, but to remain yours, not a tool for others' use. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't happen suddenly or with a dramatic act. It's a betrayal woven into the everyday, in the details we sometimes choose to ignore. That person who's always willing to gossip about others with you, as if sharing others' secrets were proof of intimacy, will likely talk about you with the same ease. And though a part of you knows this, another part chooses to believe that with you, it'll be different, that with you, there's a special connection, that you won't be on the list of people used as conversation fodder. Betrayal is rarely a total surprise. It's preceded by clear signs. Someone who only shows up when they need something, but vanishes when you're in need. Someone who praises you, but with words laced with ulterior motives, as if every kind word hides a small dagger. Someone who says they're happy for your successes, but avoids celebrating you sincerely, minimizes your progress, changes the subject when you're shining. These are small, deeply revealing gestures, and yet we often let them slide, convinced it's not a big deal, that we're being too sensitive, that it's not worth making a scene. And it's true. It's not about making a scene. It's about not lying to yourself, about learning to read those signs without needing to confront, without seeking a dramatic closure, because betrayal doesn't always deserve a direct response. Sometimes the most mature action is to cut access, reduce contact, quietly redraw your circle of trust, not to punish, but to protect your integrity. Not everyone deserves an explanation for your distance. Some people only demand explanations to retain control over your narrative. They want to understand your silence, not to repair the damage, but to keep occupying a space that no longer belongs to them. That's why walking away in silence isn't cowardice. It's emotional sovereignty. It's knowing your peace doesn't need to be defended in someone else's court. And not every withdrawal means a definitive break. Sometimes it's just taking distance to breathe again, to regain clarity, to observe without the distortion of the immediate bond. Other times, it is a complete goodbye, and in that case, the more serene it is, the more healing it becomes, because the noise of conflict only perpetuates the entanglement, while well-chosen silence sets a dignified full stop. Ask yourself this without haste. How many times have you stayed because you didn't know how to leave? And how much of yourself did you have to abandon to sustain a presence that already weighed on you? Do you need to justify your absence to someone who never cared about your well-being. Sometimes the most coherent thing you can do is walk away calmly and not return. After a great disappointment, it's common to feel that the only way to protect yourself is to harden, to close your heart, to build walls, to distrust by reflex, as if becoming cold were synonymous with strength, as if no longer feeling meant being safe. And for a while, that strategy might work. It might give you a sense of control, a safe distance, invulnerability. But there's a big difference between being strong and becoming inaccessible, even to yourself. True strength doesn't come from closing off, but from learning. It's not rigidity that protects you, but the clarity with which you now choose who to open the door to. The person who's been hurt and has transformed that hurt into wisdom doesn't need to isolate themselves from the world. They need to walk through it with new eyes, no longer naive, but not cynical either, with the ability to trust again, but from a different place, from an awareness that observes, listens, sets boundaries without ceasing to feel, because it is possible to love again without becoming vulnerable to what once destroyed you. It's possible to open up again, not because you forgot what happened, but because you now know who you are. You've reconfigured your filters, defined your boundaries, learned that there are people worth giving to, and others who only deserve distance. And the most powerful thing is that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Your peace doesn't depend on others understanding what you've been through. Your process is yours, and the greatest sign of your growth won't be what you say, but how you walk forward from now on. Fewer explanations, more presence. Less need for validation, more internal coherence. Becoming stronger doesn't mean becoming harder. It means returning with your heart intact, but with your emotional compass finely tuned. It means you no longer love from need, but from choice. That you no longer trust by reflex, but by evidence. That you no longer give without measure, but with responsibility. So ask yourself, are you ready to return to the world without hiding, but also without giving yourself away? You can love without losing yourself, trust without forgetting yourself, accompany without sacrificing yourself. Because the response to betrayal isn't to stop feeling, it's to feel with wisdom, to grow, to smile again, to live with peace. And that peace, when it arrives, doesn't make noise, but it changes everything. Perhaps the hardest thing to accept isn't that there are false, manipulative, or selfish people. The hardest thing, the thing that really hurts, is having believed in them, having opened your heart, having been available, having given your best, and feeling it was all in vain. But even that pain, even that deeply intimate disappointment, can transform into something greater, because it's not about living in fear, it's about living with awareness. And that awareness is often built from what broke us. You don't need to change your essence to protect yourself. You don't need to stop being sensitive, generous, or transparent. You just need to become clear with yourself, more selective, more aware that not everyone deserves the same version of you, that there are spaces where you can flourish and others where you can only wither, and that choosing where to stay is also a form of self-love. The world is full of masks. That's not new. But you don't have to become one to survive. You can keep being you with your light, your story, your intensity, only now with a new filter, with a gaze that observes before giving itself, with a voice that knows when to speak and when to stay silent, with a heart that opens, but also knows how to close gently when necessary. In the end, this isn't about others. It's about you, about how you choose to care for yourself, how you learn to read yourself, how you decide to relate to the world from a firmer, calmer, freer place. Because emotional freedom isn't a distant goal. It's a daily practice, a way of being with yourself, even when everything else falls apart. And when that happens, when you can be at peace with yourself, when you no longer need to defend yourself all the time, when you know your worth doesn't depend on others, then everything changes. It changes how you look, how you respond, how you choose. Even your silence changes, because that silence is no longer fear or emptiness. It's power. It's presence. It's the deepest proof that you've returned to yourself.